All right, so Ontario just announced lockdowns yesterday. And I mean, basically, they're closing gyms, cinemas, casinos, bingo halls, I think restaurants as well. They didn't mention that in there. But nonetheless, I mean, the first thing to point out is they say 28 days. And for all the people that have been paying attention this whole time, what are the odds that it's actually going to be 28 days? Like, what are the odds it's actually going to be 28 days? I think it's very likely that it will be longer. Not because, I mean, here's the thing, like, if the cases don't go down, which they probably won't, or even if they will, it'll be due to other factors most likely. Um, they're never going to admit they're wrong. And this is the thing when it comes to all of these kind of things, whether it's I mean, mask mandates is the big one too. You hear all these people think, "Oh, it's just a mask, just wear it." Well, no. The problem being is that that's not the problem. The problem is that if it doesn't work, they're never going to admit that it didn't work, right? That's the big problem. Like, here's the thing. If it was, let's say back in August, if it was, you know what, we're going to have a mask mandate for, 1 or 2 months, and after that, it's done. There's no possible way we can return to it. And if they literally wrote that into the law, yeah, I'd probably go for it. The problem is that's not how they're doing it. They're deliberately doing it in a way that they will never admit they're wrong. That's the problem. They'll never admit that it didn't work. They still refuse to acknowledge the glaring contradictions when it comes to them telling us not to wear masks back in in March, April, and into May, right? Like they still haven't acknowledged that. Again, so this is the thing when it comes to this whole kind of stuff, is that, I mean, here's the other thing too. The lockdowns did not work. Like, closing businesses did not work. It did next to nothing to prevent the spread. And not only that, you have a lot of people that are out of work right now. You have a lot of people that have a large amount of stress that is completely unjust too. Like I've always mentioned, it would be one thing if this was a like, literally going to kill hundreds of thousands of Canadians, and the death rate was like 5-10%. Yeah, maybe I would understand it. But again, this is literally a slightly worse version of the flu. And this is the problem too when it comes to information on this whole kind of stuff, is that when it comes to social media, if you post anything questioning the narrative when it comes to this whole situation, they will ban you, they will shadow ban you, they will limit your reach, they will do whatever it takes to limit the spread, or at the very least, or even just outright ban you, right? If you're someone who's on the skeptic side. The problem is that if you're on the this is doomsday side, they do nothing. They do nothing. And this is the problem, that one point of view is being artificially propped up, and another point of view, which has been the one that is right up until this point, right? Like the skeptics have clearly been proven right. I don't think it could be more obvious. But nonetheless, this is a big problem, that um, one point of view is being censored for no good reason, and another point of view is being propped up for no good reason, right? So this is why there's still so many people that are going. I mean, not to mention too, you know, people sitting around all day watching the CBC, listening to their propaganda. But this is why so many people are still paranoid about this. Because if the mainstream media was actually honest about it, and here's why they're not going to be honest about it too. If the mainstream media was actually honest about it, they would come out and say, I mean, in a nutshell, yeah, if you're under 50, the death rate's less than the flu. Even if you're over that, if you're still healthy, you still have nothing to worry about. The only people that have anything to worry about are people that have serious health conditions. Like, those are the only people that have to worry. I mean, you look at Trump, right? Like, he's a guy in his I think he's early 70s. I think he's 73, 74. Not an overly healthy individual, but he still got over it with relative ease. Like, with relative ease. So if he can do it, like, 99% of the population should be able to do it. I mean, we've seen the other thing I posted too the other day about how 70,000 US college students have tested positive for it so far this year, and not only have none of them died, but only 3 of them ended up in the hospital. So if you're someone who's young, your chances of ending up in the hospital is less than 1 in 10,000, let alone dying. Like the chances of dying if you are young and healthy is literally 1 in a million at this point. Like I don't know what the exact number is, but 1 in a million would be a fair comparison. So yeah, and this is the thing. The other thing too is that this is, people say, oh, this is just Ontario, it's just Quebec. There's already calls for it in Alberta. Like this is the big problem too. That like I've been mentioning too. I've continuously got this kind of stuff right. I mean, the one thing I got wrong was underestimating just how far the ruling elites would go to screw people over. But um, they're going to push for another lockdown. Now, again, I believe the UCP is committed to no more lockdowns in Alberta, but the one thing that you have to, I mean, I think anybody that's paying attention when it comes to this whole situation is never trust anything the government says, because, they can tell you literally don't do something and you'll be vehemently for something, and then a month later be vehemently against that same position. So don't listen to the government. I wouldn't. I don't care. And this is the thing too. I don't care what side people are on either. Like this is. I mean, Ontario, they're run by a conservative government. I believe they've done a horrible job. I'm every bit as critical of them as I am of the Trudeau government. So again, don't take anything these people say at their word. And if you actually want to, I mean, this is the other big thing too. People need to make their voices heard too. Like I know quite a few people that I've talked to that don't believe in any of this garbage. They don't believe in the mask mandates. They know the lockdowns were complete BS, but yet they don't tell people about it. Like you have to make your voices heard. Like this is no longer just minor political squabbles. Like this is the other thing too. People compare it to. It's not your traditional. Do you want taxes 2% higher or 2% lower? Like I think that's an issue. But this isn't that anymore. This is literally um, do you support the government completely destroying people's livelihoods or not for no reason? And if they question that, escalating up until the point of throwing them in jail. Like this is where we're at. This is, like I say, this is no longer some minor political squabble. So people really have to wake up. Now, I do think that the vast majority of people watching this are probably well aware. But again, it is Thanksgiving this weekend. People are going to be talking with family members, and I think pretty much everybody has family members. I mean, I know I do for sure that have their heads so deep in the sand, they'll believe whatever the news tells them. So again, you gotta talk to people too, because like I say, this is no longer minor political disagreements too. Like that's another thing, like I say, people always bring up, but that's no longer an argument. So anyway, the next thing I wanted to bring up is kind of an interesting story here out of the CBC, and it's titled BC NDP nominates former MP for stick iron riding over Indigenous women despite equity policy. Now again, I don't know what the exact wording of the NDP's policy here is, but from what I've heard, um, from what I've heard, if a BC NDP has a member, or sorry, an MP that retires or quits for whatever reason, and they're a man, specifically a white man, they need to be replaced by someone who isn't a white man, basically either an LGBT man, or a black man, or a woman, or an indigenous woman, or basically anything but a white man, specifically a straight white man. And again, that's in their policy. Now, again, you'd have to look it up to see exactly what the wording is. But I mean, long story short, they don't want straight white men. I mean, that's basically the easiest way to put it. But because they have a former MP that's fairly prominent, and that's someone that's clearly in with the establishment, at least in the NDP's case, they waived, or basically, forced the hand against the Indigenous woman and for the white guy. I think he's straight as well. So this is the problem too. Like I've been pointing out for so long, they don't believe in diversity. How many more examples of this do we need to prove they don't believe in diversity? They only believe in diversity when it benefits them, right? Like 95% of college professors and public school teachers probably isn't quite that high as the number, but the overwhelming majority are on the left. But yet, when has the left ever said, yeah, we need to get some more conservatives in here? No, they've never said that. They only care when it benefits them, right? They only care when it benefits them. If it doesn't benefit them, they will push tooth and nail for diversity. But the minute it doesn't benefit them, all of a sudden they're no longer for diversity. And this is something I've been talking about for so long now, but again, there's still so many people that actually believe this kind of stuff because it makes you feel good, my diversity this and divert. No, it's just pure garbage, like pure garbage. So anyway, this is from David Knight, and basically this is of a I don't know who it is actually. Long story short, or sorry, it's at Duke University. No, who is it? I don't know who it is exactly. But anyway, this David Knight says best illustration of mask and masochism and superstition, as he points out, the size of the smoke particles are same or greater than the size of the virus particle. Also, Duke University study showed masks create smaller particles that stay airborne longer. Now, basically, he puts on one of these medical masks, the ones that they have at every store if you don't have one. And basically, he does a vape, and the smoke just comes out the sides and through it. Like it. This is the thing too. Like, at what point do we admit that masks don't work? Like they don't work. If this is pretty much another definitive, an example of some more definitive proof that shows that it just doesn't work. Like I don't get why so many people just refuse to admit that. Like I really don't. And I think the main reason is that you have a lot of people that just want to feel like they're part of the winning team, right? So it's just blindly go along with whatever the government says, right? Like they're so ignorant and so dumbed down that the government can tell them something one month, and the next month they tell them the exact opposite and them still believe them, right? Like this the government can tell them, oh, it's all it's going to take is 14 days to flatten the curve, and 6 months later, oh, we still haven't flattened the curve, right? It's just pure garbage. Like it's such garbage. I really don't know how people are so ignorant. Like it really boggles my mind. Now, when I think of the amount of brainwashing and propaganda that's pumped out there, yeah, it actually doesn't really surprise me. But it surprised me that the average person's critical thinking skills have gotten so low these days, I guess is the better way of putting it. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is from Kian Bex, and he says the university industrial complex is collapsing, and I am here for it. And basically, the U of A is cutting 650 jobs. Now, I believe that's due to the fact that I think a lot of kids didn't come back this year because of classes being largely virtual. And I think that those were largely kids that were going to college for professions or courses that you really don't need to be. These are the gender studies and a lot of these arts degrees that are completely pointless. You're spending upwards of six figures to get a degree in something that's really not going to get you anywhere. Right? Like it's really not going to get you anywhere. And I think a lot of these people have realized that, and they're not going back. And because of that, the universities need to cut costs. Now, again, the leftist solution is just to increase government funding because, again, the reason why the left supports the universities and the teachers and the healthcare workers and all this kind of stuff is not because they care about educating kids or poor people getting healthcare. They couldn't care less about that because if they did, they would want competition. Like if they did, they would want competition. There's no questions about that. The goal, really, I mean, the main goal at least, I'm not saying they flat out don't care. I'm just saying the main goal is power, and it's political. Because again, the more money that can be pumped into areas that are run by leftists, the more money and the more power and the more influence the left can have. It's really a really simple concept. I'm not sure why people like to confuse it so much. It's simply a political thing, right? This is exactly why they bring up endlessly about oil companies and all this kind of stuff. Well, no, it's because they know that. And here's the thing: I don't even think oil companies are as far to the right as in comparison to how far colleges and public schools are to the left. Like if you pulled the average person, not like a laborer or someone actually out in the field, but if you pulled the average, administrator or something in an oil company, my guess is that they'd probably only be slightly lean conservative, right? Maybe 60, 65%, not 80 to 90 like universities and public schools. So again, I think that's complete BS that when they bring that example up. But nonetheless, like I say, the main goal here is it's simply a political and a power thing, right? If a policy can gain the left power, they will be for it. It doesn't matter how much money it costs. So anyway, that's the last thing I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. If you haven't already, make sure you follow me on Twitter especially, but also BitChute and Parler. All those links are in the description, so you can find them all there.